I've seen a lot walk through these courtroom doors in my 32 years on the bench. Drug dealers who thought they were untouchable, corporate executives who believed their bank accounts could buy them freedom, politicians who smiled at cameras while their corruption rotted communities from the inside out. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened on that Tuesday morning in Providence when the son of the President of the United States stood before me, smirking like the entire justice system was his personal playground. The courtroom was packed tighter than I'd ever seen it. News cameras lined the back wall despite my explicit orders for controlled media access. Secret Service agents stood at every exit, their earpieces crackling with constant chatter, their eyes scanning the room like we were a threat instead of officers of the court. The energy was electric, dangerous even, and I could feel it pressing against my chest as I looked down at the docket. He walked in like he owned the building. Designer suit that probably cost more than most people make in 6 months, hair perfectly styled, that same confident swagger I'd seen in countless entitled defendants who thought their money or connections made them special. But this was different. This wasn't just wealth. This was power, real, presidential, Secret Service following you everywhere. Power, and he knew it. The victim sat in the front row, a small woman in her 60s wearing a simple floral dress that had been carefully mended at the shoulder. Her name was Maria Torres, and according to the police report, she'd been selling fruit from her small cart on the corner of Westminster and Dorrance when a black Range Rover came speeding through the intersection at nearly 70 miles per hour, clipped her cart, sent her flying onto the sidewalk, destroyed her entire day's inventory, and never even slowed down. She had a broken wrist, 3 cracked ribs, and a concussion that still gave her headaches 3 months later. Her cart, her livelihood, was completely destroyed. I looked at Maria, saw the way her good hand trembled slightly in her lap, saw the quiet dignity in her worn face. Then I looked at him, at that smirk, at the way he leaned back in his chair like he was at a country club, and I felt my jaw tighten. His attorney stood first, motioning to dismiss based on insufficient evidence and procedural irregularities. But I had 3 eyewitness statements, all describing a black Range Rover with custom gold trim and personalized plates. I also had traffic camera footage from 2 different angles. That's when he spoke for the first time, and I'll never forget the casual arrogance in his voice. Your Honor, with all due respect, I think we both know how this is going to end. My father's administration has been very generous to Rhode Island. Federal funding for infrastructure, disaster relief. I'd hate to see any complications affect future cooperation between the state and federal government. The courtroom went dead silent. I heard Maria's sharp intake of breath, saw her eyes go wide with something between fear and outrage. I set down my pen very carefully, took off my glasses, folded them, then I leaned forward and looked directly into his eyes. Son, did you just threaten this court? He shrugged, actually shrugged. I'm just stating facts, Your Honor. Federal-state relations are delicate. My father values loyalty. He remembers who his friends are. He glanced at Maria and his lip curled slightly, and he remembers who wastes his time with frivolous accusations. I saw Maria shrink in her seat, saw that flicker of hopelessness cross her face, and something inside me snapped into crystal clear focus. Bailiff, I want that statement transcribed and added to the record immediately, word for word. I turned to the defendant. Now you listen to me very carefully. I don't care if your father is the president. I don't care if he's the Pope or the King of England. In this courtroom, the only power that matters is the law. The prosecutor presented her evidence methodically. The traffic camera footage was devastating, crystal clear video of that black Range Rover screaming through the intersection, clipping Maria's cart, sending produce flying through the air, and Maria herself tumbling onto the concrete. The Range Rover never even tapped the brakes. Then came the body camera footage from the traffic stop. When officers knocked on his hotel suite door, he answered with a drink in his hand, clearly annoyed. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my father is? You're making a huge mistake. Your careers are over. But those officers didn't back down. They arrested him right there, and when he resisted, when he actually shoved one of them, they added that to the charges too. Maria testified with quiet dignity. She described 12 years of working that corner, getting up at 4 in the morning to pick the best fruit. She described the impact, the pain, waking up in the hospital, 3 months of work gone, her cart destroyed. She'd lost her apartment because she couldn't work, was now sleeping on her daughter's couch. And he never even stopped, she said, looking at the defendant with profound sadness. During recess, a federal official visited my chambers, White House level. The president is prepared to personally compensate Mrs. Torres generously, all medical bills, lost wages, enough for a new cart and 6 months of living expenses in exchange. She drops the charges. I felt cold fury settle over me. Get out of my chambers. He didn't move. The alternative is that this becomes a national circus, media everywhere, political pressure. And Mrs. Torres will still be a struggling immigrant with a target on her back from half the country. I said, "Get out. And if you ever attempt to influence a case in my court again, I'll hold you in contempt and have you arrested. I don't care what agency you work for." When we reconvened, the defense attorney announced they filed complaints against the arresting officers and were demanding my recusal based on alleged bias against the administration. There it was, the nuclear option, make the cost of justice so high that people just give up. I looked at Maria, saw defeat creeping into her eyes, looked at those officers in the back, their faces carefully neutral. Then I looked at him and made my decision. Motion denied. Now, unless you have actual evidence to present, I'm ready to rule. The defendant exploded. This is bullshit. Do you know what my father can do to you? To this whole state? One phone call and your career is over. You're nothing. You're a small-time judge in a nobody city. Bailiff, remove the defendant from my courtroom. When order was restored, I delivered my ruling. I've heard the evidence. I've watched the videos. This wasn't an accident. This was a man who drove recklessly, struck a vulnerable member of our community, and fled because he believed his name would protect him from consequences. I paused. You are hereby found guilty of all charges. 2 years in state prison, suspended after 6 months, 500 hours of community service. The courtroom exploded. The defendant was screaming. His attorney was demanding appeals. Secret Service agents were talking urgently into their radios. Furthermore, I'm referring your threats to the State Attorney General for investigation of witness intimidation, and I'm ordering these transcripts made immediately public. I stood. No one is above the law. Not presidents, not princes, not the wealthy, not the powerful. That's not politics, that's justice. We're adjourned. The aftermath was predictable. The president tweeted about partisan judges. News crews camped outside my house. Congressional representatives called for investigations. But something else happened too. Regular people rallied. Fruit vendors sent letters of support. A GoFundMe for Maria raised over $400,000. The officers received commendations. Maria came to see me a month later with mangoes from her new cart, bigger and better, with a prime spot near the courthouse. "Thank you, Judge," she said, eyes shining. "You gave me my life back. You showed me that America can still work the way it's supposed to. No one is above the law, not in my courtroom, not ever, because justice isn't something you do when it's convenient or safe. Justice is what you do when everything is on the line and someone vulnerable is counting on you to be brave enough to do what's right. That's the oath I took, and as long as I'm breathing, it's a promise I'll keep."